So, let's talk about one of the most difficult, most emotionally tangled situations imaginable. What happens when a parent's gut feeling about their own child runs smack into the cold, hard reality of the legal system? It's this incredible clash of rights, of responsibilities, and of deeply, deeply held beliefs about what's actually best for a kid.
And let's start right there with that feeling. You know the one. Just picture a doctor's office. Maybe you can remember being that kid yourself, sitting on the crinkly paper of the exam table, your feet not quite reaching the floor. You're too young to really get what the adults are talking about, but you're old enough to feel that knot in your stomach, that sense that something just isn't right.
And that exact feeling of unease, well, it's at the absolute heart of a story about one father. See, when doctors started talking about putting his young daughter on ADHD medication, it wasn't just some abstract medical choice for him. No, for him, it was like a ghost from his own past had just walked into the room.
It's like all of a sudden, his own childhood was playing out right in front of him. He remembered being that little boy, feeling completely unheard, while a bunch of adults debated dosages and talked about what was wrong with him. And now, his biggest fear was that his daughter was about to be put in the exact same spot, kicking off a cycle that he was desperate to break. He actually had the perfect way to describe it, a nesting doll of generational trauma. It's this powerful idea that our unresolved pain, our misunderstandings, they don't just disappear. They get packed up and passed down to the next generation, who then passes it to the next, creating this ever tighter bundle of shared struggle. But here's where the story takes a really sharp turn. What happens when that deep personal fear, that gut instinct from a parent, crashes head-on into a co-parent who sees the whole situation completely differently? Well, that's when a family disagreement can explode into a full-blown legal fight. And this is exactly where the legal system steps in. In a lot of co-parenting situations, there's something called joint legal custody. Now, this isn't just a friendly suggestion to get along. It's a court order. It legally requires both parents to come to an agreement on the big stuff. We're talking health, education, religion, and especially something as major as starting a child on a new medication. So when one parent just goes for it and makes a decision alone, the other parent has very real legal options. For instance, if one parent starts the medication without agreement, the other can file what's called a motion to modify custody. If one parent cuts off communication, maybe takes away the kid's phone so they can't talk to the other parent, you can file a family access motion. And if it's a whole pattern of trying to damage the child's relationship with the other parent, you can even allege parental alienation. Each one of these turns a family problem into a serious courtroom battle. And really, this one case perfectly lays out this huge fundamental tension that's at the core of family law pretty much everywhere. It's this constant tug of war between doing what's best for a child's welfare and respecting a parent's fundamental rights. And how courts handle this comes down to two very different philosophies. On one hand, you've got what most U.S. courts use, the paramountcy principle. It's pretty simple, really. The child's welfare is a trump card. It automatically wins every single time over any other concern, including the rights of the parents. But there's another way to look at it. The European Court of Human Rights, for example, tends to use a balancing principle. This approach says, hold on, both the child and the parents have a right to a family life. So instead of one right just silencing the other, they're all put on the scales and weighed to find a fair, proportional solution. In a system where the child's welfare is the only thing that matters, a parent's right to family life becomes what this legal scholar called the dog that fails to bark. It's there, but you never, ever hear it. And that just forces us to ask a really difficult question, doesn't it? Is automatically silencing a parent's perspective truly what's best for a child in the long run? Or could a more balanced approach actually lead to healthier outcomes for the whole family? Now, if you push that idea even further, some legal thinkers start to argue that the whole concept of parental rights is deeply flawed to begin with. They suggest that when you really look at it, it can start to feel less like a sacred duty to a human being and a lot more like the ownership of property. And, sometimes this isn't just some academic theory. It gets said right out loud. The whole debate gets framed as a question of ownership. Who does the child belong to, the parents or the state? But notice who gets left out of that question entirely, the child. And what's really fascinating is how certain legal ideas seem to blur that line. I mean, think about it. The absolute right to decide a child's religion, the legal privilege to use physical discipline that, against anyone else, would be considered assault, the power to literally designate a guardian for your child in your will. These are all forms of control that, in almost any other context, look an awful lot like property rights. Okay, so if a system that only looks at the child's welfare can be flawed because it totally silences parents, and a system based on parental ownership is flawed because it treats kids like objects, then what's left? Is there a better way to handle these intensely human conflicts? Well, some legal scholars have proposed a more transparent path forward, one that looks something like this. Step 1, you start by acknowledging the child has rights. Step 2, you also acknowledge the parent has rights. Now, step 3 is the game changer. You weigh everyone's interests. You give the child's welfare crucial importance, absolutely, but it's not an automatic veto. And then step 4, you reach a decision that's proportional and actually explains why anyone's rights are being limited. It's a true balancing act. And this really gets to the core of it. The goal isn't to pick the parent over the child. The goal is to create a process where a parent's deepest fears and fundamental rights are actually listened to in service of figuring out what is truly best for that child. You know, think back to that father from the start of our story. In this kind of system, his fear of repeating history wouldn't just be brushed aside. It would be a valid, recognized right that gets weighed in the balance, ensuring his voice is finally heard. And so that leaves us with this final, vital question to chew on. How do we build systems that are wise enough to listen to that kid kicking their feet in the doctor's office, compassionate enough to hear a parent's terror of repeating the past, and just enough to truly balance the rights of every single person in that room? That's the challenge. Thanks for joining me.